My guest today is Todd Hepworth. He is the co-founder of Orchard STEM School, a K-8 microschool located in a working orchard in his rural community of Santaquin, Utah. It is scheduled to open this August. Prior to that, Todd has worked as a charter school director at a Waldorf-inspired school, as an elementary school teacher, and as an Air Force officer, where he led his unit in deployments to combat zones in the Persian Gulf. Todd currently serves on the board of directors for the Utah Association for the Education of Young Children. He and his wife, Michelle, have 6 children and 8 grandchildren. Todd Hepworth, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Carrie. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show.
Oh, thanks for being here. I'm excited to hear about your sort of pre-launch stage for Orchard STEM Academy. What an exciting vision that you have for this program. But let's start with your background. How did you become interested in education to begin with?
So, after I got out of the Air Force, I was serving as the children's music director in our church. And the president of that organization was a longtime educator. And she came up to me and she said, "You seem to really like teaching kids. Have you ever thought about being a teacher?" And I'm like, "No, you can't support a family if you're a teacher." And she said, "Well, this is Texas and we pay our teachers a little bit better. And if you're careful, you could probably do it." So that was the inspiration. I substitute taught at different grade levels, decided I really loved teaching elementary school. So went back to school, did a post-baccalaureate program to do all my child development and pedagogy classes, and became a teacher. And my first years of teaching in public school, I was a kindergarten teacher and I loved it. Yeah, it was exhausting, but I loved it.
Yeah, and so this was public schools in Texas as an
Yes.
elementary school teacher.
Yeah.
And
Oh, go
how
ahead.
long did you do that? And then what happened after?
So we were in Texas for 12 years and I taught elementary school there. Then we moved to Utah to be closer to extended family. I'm originally from Idaho and my wife's originally from Utah. And so we wanted to be closer. Um, so we moved here to Utah and I taught in that's where I connected with the charter school. I taught at the charter school for a while, was assistant director there, and then became the director of the charter school.
So I'm curious, Todd, your thoughts working in the sort of conventional public school system, and then in a charter school that was more focused on sort of alternative education, the Waldorf philosophy of education. What were some of your impressions in both of those environments?
Um, so when I first started teaching in Texas, we were one of over 80 elementary schools in the Fort Worth, Texas school district. We were a project-based learning school. We were kind of like a special magnet school. We were really the only one of our kind. I taught there for 9 years and I absolutely loved it. I loved that project-based learning approach. When we left, well, before we left, I transitioned to a more traditional school and I almost quit the profession after my experience in like a traditional elementary school.
What happened?
Well, so I had just spent 9 years teaching at this amazing project-based learning
Mm.
school. And now I was teaching in a school where all the desks are in straight rows and the kids are doing either worksheets or they're using Chromebooks for most of their academic time. And everything was just so tightly regimented. And there was a lot of time spent on preparing for standardized tests. And I'm like, I can't do this. This is crushing my soul here. I mean, especially after 9 years at such an amazing school, and then suddenly I was in this other environment. And so I had to make a decision. I was either going to leave the profession or I was going to find something that more aligned with what I knew education could be, and that's what drew me to the charter school that had the Waldorf emphasis.
And so you were teaching at the Waldorf school.
Yep.
And were you still in the elementary ages?
Yes, the school where I taught was the public charter school was a K-6 school.
So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about the Waldorf education philosophy. It's one of my favorites. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about Waldorf, at least in the private Waldorf schools, which I'm more familiar with than the public charters, is that there's not this pressure, especially in the early primary years, to, start to read, right? Like there's a lot of focus now in conventional public schools, a lot of it sort of initiated by No Child Left Behind and some federal legislation around standardized testing and curriculum standards that's really pushed this emphasis on early childhood literacy and kindergartners being able to read, that just didn't exist, certainly when I was in public schools, and is really just accelerated over the past couple of decades. And Waldorf schools have, for a long time, had a much more sort of developmentally appropriate, I would say, belief around literacy and reading, not kind of pushing 4 and 5-year-olds to be reading the way that we do now. So I'd just be curious about your impressions of that. Did you see that, I guess, sort of, again, more developmentally appropriate approach to learning at the Waldorf school?
Sure. And if it's okay, I'll back up just a little
Yeah.
bit and talk about public school. When I first became a kindergarten teacher, the end of kindergarten standard for kindergarten students was a guided reading level B. It was called an emergent reader. These are the kind of picture books that kids open, and most of it is a picture with maybe one sentence with simple words at the bottom, and that's what it was. And 2 years after that, the standard changed to a guided reading level D, which is a beginning reader with maybe a half-page photo or picture, and then several sentences. And so I'm thinking, all of these 2 years prior, all of these kids that left my classroom prepared to go into first grade would now suddenly be identified as needing reading intervention because they weren't reading on level. And it had me scratching my head going, the kids didn't change, right? What changed was the expectation to push that first grade reading standard down to kindergarten. And you're absolutely right. It's not developmentally appropriate for young kids. Their brains have not developed to the point where some kids have. Some kids are amazing readers and they can read above level, but my goodness, I mean, all of the pressure on kids, the pressure on teachers and everything, I don't think it's good for kids. So now to answer
well, no, that's so, and that was at an innovative public school, like that you were saying that you absolutely loved working at, and still they were constrained and you were constrained by these changing academic standards.
Yeah. So at a Waldorf school, we were still a public school. In Utah, charter schools or public schools were still held to the same requirements for student testing and things like that a normal district school is. But we approached it differently. We approached it, we knew what the standards were, but it wasn't a drill and kill sort of approach to helping kids develop to read. It was in a very a more natural kind of setting, so more student interest driven. So let's say students are interested in learning about seeds, for example. Well, then the vocabulary and everything would be tied to their interest as they were doing projects on looking at soil and planting seeds and charting plant growth over the next few weeks and those kinds of things. So the academic requirements were still there, but we worked to embed them into things that made sense to students, things that they chose to learn about. There was more student voice and choice, and things that held their interest.
So how long were you teaching there?
So I taught there for a year, and then I was asked by the board to serve as the assistant director. And I did that for a year, and then our director moved on, and I was asked to be the executive director and did that for 2 years at the charter school.
And then what happened next?
Then I learned about something amazing called House Bill 215 and the Utah Fits All Scholarship. And so I realized that this was an opportunity for me to take everything that I had learned as an educator, everything I knew about developmentally appropriate practice and making learning fun for kids, and create a school where that could be the reality for kids. And so I found another educator who had a lot of the same sorts of ideas about education for kids, and together we started talking about, well, can we make a micro school in our little rural community that does all of these amazing things to help kids be engaged and excited about learning? And that's how it started.
And the House bill that you were talking about became the Utah Fits All Scholarship, Utah's
Yes.
universal school choice program applying to all school age children in the state of Utah to be able to use a portion of state allocated education funding for a variety of approved education expenses, including tuition for microschools like Orchard STEM. And so what happened next? I mean, you had this conversation with this colleague and said, let's focus on creating a microschool now that more students, particularly it sounds like in your community, would have financial access to that microschool. So then what did you do?
Well, it started with a series of conversations. We realized, let's become business partners. So we did. I, at the time, was going, just finishing up a course through the Veteran Business Association for small businesses. And so I was learning about small business finance and marketing and the business side of it. So I was just finishing that up. She has a PhD in STEM education and was looking for ways to promote STEM education for young children. We just sort of happened to come together through, through a couple of conversations that we'd put on social media. And so then we became business partners. We have a weekly meeting on Tuesday mornings, and we have for about 6 months now, where we get together and we create the vision for the school. We create the legal entity. We located the property. We've got our building plans in place. We talk about marketing. So I guess about half of our meetings, half of our weekly meetings are very business focused on how we're going to make this successful. We talk to mentors, we meet with other micro school owners, and then about half is focused on the educational side. But we're both educators at heart. We really don't super enjoy doing the business side, but we realize that if we want our school to be viable and we want it to continue on for years into the future, it has to be successful, the business side. And so that's why I did the business.
So the planning stages, it sounds like, Todd, really started in 2023
Yes.
when you and your colleague sort of joined forces and thought about the vision and started thinking about the business entity and all of that. And I'm fascinated by this small business course that you took through the Veterans Administration, because, like you said, you're an educator. That was your profession, that was your passion. Maybe not having sort of those business skills. So, what were some of the sort of key tips and strategies that you took away from that course, sort of upskilling in an area that you weren't as familiar with?
I have to say that probably the biggest learning part was, you're familiar with the Shark Tank series that was on TV, right?
Of
They
course,
did
love it.
they did what's called a minnow tank. So there were several of us that had gone through the course together. It was about a 6-month course. And we had to make a presentation. We had to pitch our idea to a panel of judges, which were from the Utah Small Business Administration and some area professionals, and there was like a bank manager, there was a real estate professional. There was this panel of judges we had to pitch the idea to. And so it was a chance for me to take everything that I had learned in the course about developing a business plan, identifying our target market, providing a year's budget with a 3-month cash flow projection, and what the implementation team is going to look like, where it's going to be located, what services are we getting, all of that. It was kind of like a crash course, by no means on the level you would get as an MBA, but it was super helpful to do that for 6 months, wrap it all up into a 7-minute presentation, present it to judges, and then get feedback. I was super surprised. I won.
Ah,
I,
no kidding.
I,
Wow.
it wasn't much. I won a $9,000 award that then we were able to use to take care of a whole lot of our marketing for our micro school. That's where the bulk of our funds have gone.
Just incredible. And so throughout that time, were you thinking about a business formation? You know, I often hear founders say, should I be a 501c3 nonprofit and run my micro school that way? Should I be an LLC? You know, what were you thinking about and what made you, or what decision did you ultimately come to?
We started out talking about making a limited liability company. Then, as we looked about what would be most beneficial for our families, um, we want a way for our families and for community partners to be able to donate and then
Mm,
also enjoy the tax advantages of doing that. And so we're a 501c3. That's after talking with some legal counsel about what would most benefit the vision of our school, that's the direction we decided to go in. And so we formed a board of other members in the community who liked the idea, who have the same ideas about education that we do, and we've held board meetings, and then we have our business meetings, and where Lori and I sort of plan out the business strategy, and then get things approved by the board, and that's how we're proceeding.
right. And did you know out of the gate when you were envisioning this school that you wanted it in an orchard, that you were attracted to that kind of model, or how did that come about?
Yes, absolutely. Santaquin is surrounded by orchards, cherry orchards and apple orchards. I think the official statistic is we're the second largest contiguous region of tart cherry growers in the United States. So, but
Wow.
and so there's this history around the community of being of orchards kind of being the foundation of the community, and then it just sort of grew from there. And many of the historical families in the community are now, these are fourth generation orchard owners, and they've been super successful at it. So as Lori and I talked about, where can we locate this that will help kids be connected with the history and the culture of our community, be connected with the environment, have practical application for the STEM principles that we're learning in school. Everything sort of came together, and that we're going to do this in an orchard. Lori has some extended family that own an orchard. They said, we'd love to designate part of our orchard for you to build on. And so,
Mm.
um, so that's how that came about.
Incredible. So it's going to be a STEM focused
Yeah.
program. I guess how do you see the day going? Are you imagining that it will weave in a lot of the sort of educational philosophies and approaches that you've been working with, project-based learning and the
Yeah.
Waldorf inspired models? I guess how do you see the school functioning kind of pedagogically, philosophically?
Thank you. So we hope to have enough students that we can have two main groups of students, a K-1-2 group and a 3-4-5 group. Um, our commitment is to do, and we've taken the commitment to do 1,000 hours of education outside each year. So a normal day would
Mm.
look like kids come to school, younger class is inside, and we're focusing on some academic things, while the older class maybe goes outside. Switch at lunch, older class comes in, younger class goes outside and works on the practical application of the project base and the academic principles that they've been learning in the morning. So about half the instructional time is going to be outside in the orchard. We're 10 minutes away from a canyon that leads up into the beautiful Wasatch Mountains. So we're going to be up in the mountains a lot. We've got community partners that we'll be working with. We don't want kids to spend 7 hours of the day in a school building. A few hours, okay, but half the time is going to be outside.
Just sounds magical. And you have heard from parents that they're really interested in this. And that's sort of the process that you're in now is recruiting and getting the word out.
Yeah.
What is happening there in terms of figuring out who your initial cohort will be of students?
We sent out a survey a couple of months ago to determine what community interest was in and what program would appeal most to the members of our community. Many of them said, I want my kids to be up and moving. I don't want them sitting in a desk all day. Several of them said outside. Several of them expressed things like, my child's teachers are starting to talk about things like ADHD and And I know that I don't want to take my 5-year-old to a pediatrician and get medicine for them. They need to move. He's always needed to move. He's been that way since birth, and so there's been a lot of support from interested families in this approach, that there's lots of nature-based engagement, lots of time for exploring, for moving, for engaging in meaningful projects, and not so much being in a desk.
And you said you surveyed your community. What do you mean by that? What did you do to do this market research, basically, of what people are interested in?
We designed a fairly simple Google survey that we sent out through social media, through contacts that we kind of already had. We got a couple of hundred responses. Part of the survey was, simple check this, like kind of like a scale: agreed, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. And then we had some free form where parents could put in what their interests really were. We found those to be the most valuable. All of it informed us, but those comments from parents where they had a chance to express, this is what I want for my child as they go through their education, those were valuable. They helped us.
So you're still a few months out from opening. You said to me before we started recording that you expect about 20 students, and you think you'll grow quickly and need to sort of hire additional teachers. What's left to be done now before launch?
Finishing up the space for us to meet in. That's kind of our big one, is we need to finish our facility. And it's not just one building. We'll have a main building where the kids meet. But we're also putting in some pavilions throughout the orchard. So there are spaces there for kids to meet and do small group project work together, still outside, but with a roof over their head, at least, if the weather turns that way. That's probably our biggest one, is getting the facility ready to go. The other one is a lot of our families are going to rely on the Utah Fits All Scholarship. That window closes mid-April, and then by the end of April, families should know whether they've been awarded the scholarship or not. That'll have a big impact on giving us our enrollment numbers and knowing what we need to do as far as ordering supplies and hiring a teacher or an assistant if needed. So those are the two big, I guess, unknowns at this point: is when's our facility going to be done, and what's our enrollment going to look like.
And regarding the Utah Fits All Scholarship, how will that impact tuition? Will your learners be coming tuition free to Orchard STEM School, or nearly tuition free? I guess, how's that shaping up?
So our tuition's a little over $9,000 a year. The Utah Fits All Scholarship provides $8,000 a year per child. And so most of their tuition will be satisfied by the Utah Fits All Scholarship. And then there'll be about $100 a month that parents would come up to contribute towards the cost of education. We're also partnering with some other community businesses to provide partial scholarships. And then we've got plans to provide some school-based scholarships as needed. We suspect that most, if not all, of our students will have a scholarship of some kind to help them through school, whether it pays for part or whether it pays for almost all of it.
Todd, do you think you would have decided to launch the school without the Utah Fits All Scholarship, without a universal school choice policy, or how crucial was that policy to your entrepreneurship decisions?
Really crucial for me and the community where I live. There are successful private schools in some of the more populated areas of Utah. I'm in a small rural community. And I don't think I really wanted to be in our community. I love my community. I want the kids in my community to have the opportunity to have an amazing education. We've got one choice, and that's public school. There are no other choices for us. And honestly, I don't see how I could have made it work if if it was $9,000 a year that families were just paying straight out of their pocket. Um, we have very, very few families, I think, in my community that would have been able to do something like that. We've got a few homeschool groups that do an amazing job of educating kids, but a micro school I do not think would have happened in our community without the support of the scholarship.
Yeah, and you decided to open your school as a recognized private school, not as a consortium of homeschoolers. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. So I see micro schools can go either way. Some people,
Right.
and often it depends on state laws and how easy it is to open a private school or not. But some of these micro schools operate as groups for groups of homeschoolers who could go 5 days a week, and some operate as recognized private schools. So just
Yeah.
curious how that worked for you. So, what are your dreams? What are your thoughts as sort of think about the next year or two? What do you hope Orchard STEM School accomplishes?
I hope that, first of all, kids get an amazing education, that they come out of that when they leave Orchard STEM School, they'll know that they have a voice and a choice in their education. Students are the primary stakeholders in their own education. Um, and we spend so much time telling students what they need to learn. And we remove a lot of that choice from them. So when they leave Orchard STEM School, I hope they leave with a choice, with the understanding that they have a voice and a choice in their own education, and that they're really engaged in developing a good education for themselves. I hope that they leave with a sense of wonder and creativity and an approach to inquiry that's not, I'm doing this because somebody tells me that I have to, but I'm learning because I want to learn. I hope that they leave with valuable ties to other members of the community, that they see that education is not removed from our environment. It's an integral part of our environment. It's a part of the community. It's not just something we do when we go to a school surrounded by four walls and we learn things in isolation, that it's really embedded in who we are and where we live. Um, for the school, it may be in the future that we expand into middle school and high school. We'll kind of see how that goes. My big dream, though, is once we've established proof of concept here that this works in Santaquin, is to start looking at the other rural communities around us, and that we're able to go into those communities, work with parents, work with members of the communities, stand up a new micro school which is embedded in their community and reflects the values of the parents and the families in those communities, and take that to rural communities. As I said, you can go to the bigger, the more populated areas of Utah. Lots of school choice there. There are private schools, public schools, district schools, charter schools, parochial schools. You get out into rural communities, and there's one, and that's usually the district school. So that's my vision. I want choice for rural families as well.
Just such a beautiful vision, Todd. And so, how do you see education changing, or do you see education changing um, with the advent of these micro schools, with the growth in school choice policies? I guess, what is your sense of the future of the education ecosystem more generally? And related to that, do you think that there are ways that it could impact public schools in a positive direction?
I do. I do think that there's a way to impact public schools. I I worry a little bit about the reaction from public schools. I worked with amazing educators in public schools for almost 15 years. These are dedicated, hardworking teachers. They give everything that they have to help their students be successful. But there are also very clear policy and procedural restraints that inhibit innovation. Um, so I think as innovation fosters through micro schools, through homeschool consortiums, through private schools, I think that kind of innovation will hopefully inspire public schools to open up a little more and to do some more innovation within public schools. Public schools aren't going away. I shake my head sometimes at the cries that I hear that, this is going to destroy public schools. No, it's not. Public schools will always be with us, and there will always be funding for public schools. But now, in addition to that, there's funding for innovation within education. And that's a beautiful thing. I think that can only improve education as a whole, to have innovative ways kind of along the outside edges that are doing some of these things that will then have an influence on our more traditional ways of doing things. That's my hope anyway.
Yeah. So Todd, as we begin to wrap up, I'd love to hear your advice to new founders or prospective education entrepreneurs who might be inspired by your story and want to launch their own microschool. What would your advice be to them as they think about getting started?
Thank you. And thank you so much for that question. Don't do it alone. You won't succeed. It's too hard. It's impossible to know everything and to make it successful on your own. I was fortunate. I found a partner that was going in the same direction that I was. We worked together amazingly well. We seem to complement each other with different strengths and places that we have challenges. There are also groups out there of microschool founders who get together and they mentor each other. There are more formal groups. Not in Utah yet, but in some of the other states, such as Arizona, who provide training for new microschool owners and help walk them through everything from founding the legal entity to getting ready to open your doors. Find support, whether it's business support, microschool support, education support. Find somebody who will work with you and pull alongside you, because I went into it a little bit naive with this hope that I was going to make this incredible school. And I soon realized that it was too overwhelming to do by myself. And so I've reached out to some of those other resources to help me be successful. It's a community thing.
Oh, that's such great advice. So Todd, if my listeners and viewers want to learn more about Orchard STEM School or connect with you and follow your progress, how should they do that?
orchardstem.org. That's our website. We also have a presence on Facebook and Instagram. And so for those who are not in the community and who are ways away, that's the best way. There's an email address on our website that if you have questions or you'd like to just maybe ask about the journey or about the educational program, please email us. We'd love to talk with you.
Well, best wishes on your launch. And Todd Hepworth, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you, Carrie. It's been a pleasure. Best wishes to everybody who wants to join in this adventure.